are counting down to a joint address to Congress by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a historic visit. It's believed to be the Ukrainian leader's first foreign visit since Russia invaded his country in February. And it's just after a press conference with President Biden. The two spoke at length about the extensive money being promised by the White House to Ukraine. President Biden expressing hope for a just peace between the two and saying the U.S. won't leave Ukraine's side. And in an intensely powerful moment, President Zelensky is giving this message to the American people.
I wish you peace. I think that is the main thing, and you understand it only when the war in your country, when somebody like these terrorists from Russia come to your houses. And I wish you to see your children alive and adult.
It's been a busy day for the two leaders. They also met in the Oval Office, speaking behind closed doors for more than 2 hours with national security officials and cabinet members. And Zelensky arrives at a pivotal time for two big reasons. First, for his own war efforts. You see Zelensky's visit in Bakhmut this week, one of the most dangerous cities on the front lines. Ukraine's worried about what could be a winter slog as Russian President Vladimir Putin orders an onslaught on Ukrainian infrastructure, plunging the country into darkness. Those fears of a winter full of attacks are partly why the president is okaying this new $2 billion military aid package that includes the U.S. training Ukrainian forces and a Patriot missile battery that Zelensky has been desperately calling for. But it's also crucial because of the shifting winds in Congress, with Republicans taking back the House. Congress is prepared to include another $44 billion in aid into the annual government spending bill this week. After that, it's up in the air. Let's go ahead and start with Monica Alba at the White House. So, Monica, President Biden's promising a lot of money to help Ukraine. Biden also insisting that the global alliance to help Zelensky is stronger than ever.
Exactly right, Lindsay. The president said to the Ukrainian president, we're with you for the duration, however long this takes. Both men really implying here that this war in Ukraine is far from over. And that is why you have seen this shift from the United States in now offering the Patriot missile defense system. This is something that a couple of months ago, the Ukrainian president had asked for. And we even had reporting at NBC News about a pretty testy phone call between President Zelensky and President Biden, where he was asking for more help in the weaponry department and where President Biden had to push back and say, look, we've given you everything we can at this point. So now fast forward to here where we are. And the fact that even this was able to take place is remarkable. President Zelensky said for months they were trying to make this happen, that he wanted to come to the U.S., but it just wasn't possible because of all of the security concerns. And President Biden again reiterated that he will support Ukraine in whatever way he has to, and he continued to condemn President Putin's actions in Russia. Take a listen to more from the American president during this historic press conference.
I've never seen NATO or the EU more united about anything at all, and I see no sign of there being any change. We all know what's at stake here. Our European partners all the more so. They fully understand it.
And so, again, the president there stressing there's no change here to the NATO alliance, and also talking about the fact that we are heading into winter. And that's a huge component to all of this, because that means the battlefield conditions will change in Ukraine. And that is a big reason why the U.S. wants to help them right now more in this defensive posture. Lindsay.
Yeah, and Monica, there were a lot of really powerful moments. One of the journalists on the Ukrainian delegation said, I come to you as a Ukrainian. My family is in Kyiv. I know they're alive because of American help. And another American journalist asked President Biden why it was so important for this meeting to be face-to-face. Talk to us about that exchange.
For as long as he has been president, top Biden aides have said there's nothing he values more than face-to-face leader negotiation and time. That, of course, you can get only so far on the phone or on a leader Zoom. And that is why they really wanted to bring the two leaders together. So President Biden spoke to the importance of that. But in terms of that other emotional moment, this is what's known as a 2-and-2 in White House parlance, which is you get two questions from the U.S. journalists in the room and two questions from the Ukrainians. And it was exactly that. The Ukrainian journalist who said, I'm not just here as a reporter, but I have my family back in Ukraine. And he even told President Biden, they may not be alive if it weren't for you and the help that the United States is providing. Lindsay.
Such a powerful moment. Monica Alba, thank you. Next up for Volodymyr Zelensky, he is going to address a joint session of Congress at 7:30 Eastern time at what could be a crucial moment for Washington's support of his war. Why? Because you'll remember back in May, 57 House Republicans and 11 Republican senators voted against a $40 billion aid package for Ukraine. It wasn't enough to sink the deal, but the dynamics are now up in the air because the GOP is taking back the House in 2 weeks. So Hallie is on Capitol Hill. And Hallie, a senior Biden administration official, denies this was all set up to try and urge House Republicans to make sure they're in line with Ukraine here. But what do we know about what the future of Ukraine aid will look like?
Yeah, well, it might not have been the intention, or at least that's what they're saying. But nevertheless, when I've talked to my sources up here, their point is that if that's one of the things that gets solved by this, that Republican lawmakers who may be reticent about continuing to push funding towards Ukraine, they could have a change of heart, especially with the Ukrainian president coming here in person at such a time of tumult in his home country to make the appeal, not just for continued support from American taxpayers, but also expressing the gratitude that he expressed, for example, in the White House and at other points during his visit. You got to imagine that's what he's going to bring here to the floor. Nevertheless, this is the tone that he's walking into among some House Republicans. It was expressed by Kevin McCarthy, the top Republican, but certainly it's coming from pressure within his own conference. Listen.
Very clear about the baseline's too high, spending's too much. We need to be cutting spending.
And what is your message to members of your party in the House who don't want more funding for Ukraine? I mean, was that one of the things that you talked about in there?
No, we didn't talk that much about it.
So McCarthy leaving a meeting with his Senate Republican counterparts, saying they didn't discuss future funding for Ukraine there, but everyone is aware that this is a big difference between Senate Republicans and House Republicans, all of this against the backdrop of the fact that we're about to go through a sea change here in Washington. Come January, Republicans take control of the House, and now it becomes a question of if the bipartisan support for Ukraine will continue monetarily.
Hallie, what are lawmakers expecting from Zelensky's address tonight?
Well, look, they are expecting to hear some of the similar themes that he presented while he was there at the White House alongside President Joe Biden. For many of them, they hope to see this as an appeal that allows the American public to see what the tangible impacts are of their taxpayer dollars going over to fund this military effort. That's something that Republican senators have said they think would be helpful going forward here. And again, just to underscore the difference between how Republicans are talking depending on which chamber we're talking about, here's Mitch McConnell talking earlier today.
But the most basic reasons for continuing to help Ukraine degrade and defeat the Russian invaders are cold, hard, practical American interests. By assisting Ukraine today, America is directly demonstrating our commitment to the basic principles of territorial integrity and national sovereignty.
So you hear McConnell there, Lindsay, and this is at a point where the Senate is currently working through its version of the omnibus package that's future funding for next year. In that package is $44 billion in Ukraine funding. So at least for next year, that is likely to go through. The open question is, though, when they start in this coming year, looking ahead, will that funding be as easily won?
Hallie, thank you. But let's talk more about the weapons that the U.S. is going to be sending to Ukraine, including the Patriot missile defense system. Courtney Cubie right now at the Pentagon. Courtney, President Biden was asked in this joint press conference with Ukrainian President Zelensky about this move and basically saying, have you talked about how it might appear escalatory? President Biden said it's defensive, it's not escalatory. And if Russia never bombs Ukraine, they wouldn't have to use it.
Yeah, that's right. So the problem is, for months, since the Zelensky government's been asking for these Patriot systems, one of the arguments that we've heard from Biden administration officials about why they're not sending it is because it could potentially be escalatory. So when you say a system is defensive, yes, this is an air defense system. It provides the ability to shoot down cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and even aircraft. And it's an extremely advanced and successful system in that effort. It has the ability it's one of the most advanced systems in the U.S. arsenal, frankly, even in the world. The missiles themselves are, while they are very accurate, they're extremely expensive. So when you're looking at something like the current threat from these smaller drones, when you have a roughly $3 to $6 million individual interceptor missile, that may not be the best thing to be firing against some of these small Iranian-made drones. But when you talk about missiles, and particularly aircraft, which may be something that may be a bigger threat in the coming months and weeks in Ukraine, this is an effective system. It also has a much higher altitude and range than some of the other air defense systems. But on President Biden talking about this as being a defensive system, one reason that this is potentially escalatory to some people in the Biden administration is, consider this scenario. A Russian aircraft is flying on the Russian side of the border, but it's armed and potentially presenting a threat in the Ukrainian side. Would that be a defensive measure if the Ukrainians were to shoot down that Russian aircraft with a Patriot missile? That's one of those areas where that's a subjective call. Is that a defensive measure or an offensive measure against that aircraft? We asked a number of officials here today about that sort of scenario and whether the U.S. had any kind of assurances from the Ukrainian military, Ukrainian government, that they wouldn't shoot down or engage Russian assets on the Russian side of the border. And defense officials and U.S. military officials refused to address that scenario, using the same language that we heard from President Biden there, that it was a defensive system.
Okay, Courtney Hubie, thank you so much for joining us on this. Appreciate it. Well, this winter storm we've been telling you about is just hours away, and it's going to be bad. Our climate team expects it to be the worst pre-Christmas winter storm in decades. We're talking more than 107 million people under winter alerts right now. Thousands expected to be without power, and travel coming to a standstill tomorrow and Friday. From the Great Lakes to New England, you'll be feeling wind gusts up to 60 miles an hour. Blizzard conditions are expected from Chicago to Buffalo. I want to show you here, most of Texas will be below freezing for anywhere between 48 to 72 hours. And you can see the cities where the storm is already developing. Many local officials today spending time trying to prepare, warning people to take this seriously.
This is going to be really dangerous. This is really, really cold. You need to stay inside and hunker down.
Meanwhile, airports expect their busiest day to be tomorrow. Maggie Vespa is in Chicago with more.
Nationwide, thousands of delays and cancellations are already stacking up as holiday travelers here at O'Hare and across the country scramble to get out ahead of this winter storm. Airlines are waiving rebooking fees, asking people who are right now scheduled to fly out tomorrow or Friday to possibly move their flights up or postpone their flights. And we've seen a lot of people are actually heeding that warning. We met one man who was flying with his family from Chicago to San Antonio, Texas. They had a flight out tomorrow, and they moved that flight up to today, with the exception of his brother. His brother, he said, tried to rebook his flight on the United app, and he said suddenly the app crashed. And their interpretation was there was so much traffic that the airlines are having trouble keeping up, so they came to the airport to try to rebook that flight. Overall, airlines and experts stressing patience and asking people to sign up for the alerts tied to their airline, so that if your flight is canceled or delayed, you can find out early and come up with a backup plan as this storm rolls through. Back to you.
Maggie Vespa, thanks. The Biden administration today trying to fight the shortage of flu medicine around the country. It's releasing doses of Tamiflu from the Strategic National Stockpile. We're seeing shortages of over-the-counter pain relievers and medicines as flu cases keep rising. CVS and Walgreens have even placed purchase limits on certain children's medication because of the shortages. Dr. Kavita Patel joins me right now. So, Dr. Patel, the Strategic National Stockpile, it's been used to respond to crises like 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, outbreaks of Zika and Ebola. How significant is it that this is being used for the flu season?
Lindsay, I think it indicates just how stressed the health systems are, and states in particular. Number one, the Strategic National Stockpile is really meant to be used, especially for things like antivirals during a pandemic situation, where in a pandemic situation due to COVID-19, but this is the kind of extra room that states have asked for in trying to get Tamiflu because they just don't have enough. There might be some in pharmacies, but states want to be prepared. So the Biden administration made this accommodation with an exception for a pandemic to allow to have states be able to dispense Tamiflu. It's also just another warning that we're in the thick of it. We're not out of it yet, and this could be another 4 to 6 weeks with a heavy flu season.
Dr. Patel, we don't know how many doses from the stockpile will be made available, but do you know exactly how many there could be in there? Do you think this will be enough to ease the shortage?
It's certainly enough. I mean, Lindsay, the good news about the stockpile is that what they do is maintain an inventory just for these types of scenarios. So you're right. I don't know the exact amount, but it will be enough because not only do we have the stockpile providing supply, but the manufacturers of Tamiflu and other branded medications are literally manufacturing 24/7. So I think the idea is to try to get ahead of this by having as much available and giving states and local areas as much flexibility to draw down from that stockpile. It's the right move to make, and I think that this is just another sign as people are traveling in this cold weather to mask up and try to prevent from getting infected in the first place.
Okay, Dr. Kavita Patel, thanks so much. Sam Bankman-Fried, the former CEO of FTX, will be heading back to the U.S. tonight. That's according to the Bahamas Attorney General in a statement coming into us just before we came on the air. The Bahamas foreign minister signed Bankman-Fried's extradition not too long ago. Bankman-Fried arrived at a Bahamian courthouse for a hearing this morning. You see him there on your screen. You'll remember authorities in the Bahamas arrested SBF, as he's known, last week at the request of the U.S. government. Prosecutors say he played a key role in the collapse of FTX and hid its problems from the public and investors. If Bankman-Fried gets convicted, the 30-year-old could potentially spend the rest of his life in prison. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins me now. And Gabe, there's been, it sounds like, some discord between Bankman-Fried, his U.S. counsel, his Bahamian attorney. How do we get to this extradition agreement?
Yeah, Lindsay, no shortage of drama here. You'll remember just a few days ago, actually on Monday, this extradition hearing was supposed to happen, but it devolved essentially into chaos. The Bahamian attorney for SBF said that his client actually needed more time to read the indictment that gave an indication that he might not agree to extradition to the United States. But by the end of the day, that had changed. Apparently, there was some discussion behind the scenes, and the legal team for SBF indicated that he would agree to be extradited to the U.S., and now here we are. There was an extradition hearing today where, yes, he agreed to be extradited back to the U.S., and now, essentially, the paperwork has been signed. He will be on his way back here tonight. He's essentially being brought back here on a plane, expected to arrive back into the U.S. sometime later tonight, Lindsay.
So it's my understanding the next step is a bail hearing in Manhattan. Do we know anything on the timing?
Yeah, and that's a big question. While he was in the Bahamas, his legal team had asked for bail, was denied back then. But there will be a hearing tomorrow, we understand. Unclear what will come in terms of bail. That is a big question. Will he be granted bail? You'll remember Bernie Madoff was granted bail in his case while he awaited trial. So that's something we are looking for. But again, he's expected to be back in court here in New York tomorrow.
I mean, when we talk about, again, the potential consequences here if he's convicted, including life in prison.
Oh, yeah.
These are very serious charges.
Extremely serious charges. The charges include wire fraud and money laundering. But, experts we've spoken with, including a former federal prosecutor today, said that this is one of the largest financial crimes potentially in memory. Wow. I mean, the allegations are extremely serious here. And we also spoke with one of the investors in STX, who she says that she lost nearly $1.5 million when this crypto exchange collapsed. She actually flew down to the Bahamas and wanted to look SBF in the eye. And it was, it's a dramatic loss for many of these investors. And they say they want to see what happens here. But again, we're expecting that court hearing tomorrow as SBF is extradited back to the U.S. later tonight.
Okay. Gabe Gutierrez, thanks so much.
You bet.
NBC News is, just as we've been on the air tonight, the January 6th committee releasing 34 witness testimony transcripts from its investigation into the attack on the Capitol ahead of the release of the final report tomorrow. It comes after that final public meeting on Capitol Hill this week. in which the committee released a summary of its findings and voted to make criminal referrals to the DOJ for former President Trump, his lawyer John Eastman, and others. The final report is expected to include transcripts of witness testimony and additional information as it relates to law enforcement and security prep failures. Julie Shurkin joins me now. Julie, good to see you here. I know your team is busy reading through these transcripts. Anybody of note on the list?
Yeah, look, a couple of people are of note on the list, but not so much as the contents. For example, John Eastman is in here, which, of course, the committee just issued a criminal referral for, in addition to former President Trump. Jeffrey Clark in here as well. That's the former Department of Justice lawyer that former President Trump tried to pressure and make as the acting attorney general when they were going through their election contests of the 2020 election. Nick Fuentes is in here. Roger Stone is in here. Michael Flynn in here as well. All of these, as we are literally sitting here and poring over these transcripts, are just pages and pages and pages of them pleading the Fifth Amendment. I mean, Michael Flynn, in the beginning, interesting color here, actually had his wife in the room. She had to leave for their interview. Some of them, Roger Stone, for example, not even answering what his role is or what his role was, where he lives. Really simple questions that they are all pleading the Fifth to. And this is just part of the large batch of transcripts that we expect to see from the committee in the coming days and weeks, as they promise to unveil these transcripts of more than 1,000 people that they've interviewed behind closed doors. We also, of course, are waiting for their final report to be released. That was supposed to be released earlier today. Now it's looking likely like it'll be released tomorrow. But as you can see, even in these final hours, we're still getting these drips and drabs of transcripts that we are just surprised to see whenever they hit our inboxes.
Yeah, so do we know anything, Julie, about the delay in the report's release?
Well, look, we've been told all day it was a printing issue. Obviously, the report is expected to be more than 1,000 pages, so that could be conceivable. But we're also, as we got later in this day, coming against the deadline, of course, of Ukrainian President Zelensky addressing Congress. And I think the committee knows full well that even if they had these pages ready up until the address was supposed to happen, that it could be a little bit too late for them to release this report. And so they went ahead and pushed it to tomorrow. But the official word is that this is, of course, a printing issue and nothing else. It seems to be that is the delay. The publishing office is the entity in which it prints these files. Kyle Stewart on our team reached out to them, and they said when they were given the green light from the committee to go ahead and proceed with these files, that they will do so. But that's all we have right now.
Julie, once this report does drop in its entirety tomorrow, and as you continue to pour over these transcripts tonight, what will you and the team be looking out for?
Well, look, we already have a nice outline from the committee in their executive summary, which was more than 100 pages on Monday. That's the same meeting, of course, in which they issued these criminal referrals. And they're going to continue to make the case that it was former President Trump who was responsible for January 6th, for the events that followed and the events that happened prior to the insurrection. But also we expect, just based on the outline that we have, these 8 chapters that are going to be in this report are very much going to closely match all of the public hearings that we've seen. And we know that they're all thematic. They all had different themes to them. We know the committee plans to also focus at least a little bit in the final report on the law enforcement response. That has been heavily scrutinized for being left out of their executive summary. But all of these things, as the committee looks ahead to releasing this report tomorrow, will be focused on what the committee has spent the last 18 months of their investigation poring over, which, of course, to them comes down to the big piece of this, which is that they found former President Trump was responsible for the insurrection. And that's exactly what they referred him on Monday.
All right, Julie Shurkin, thanks so much. House Democrats are expected to release former President Trump's highly anticipated full tax returns from 2015 to 2020 any day now. But tonight, House committee reports are giving us some more information about what those returns will look like. Bombshell findings that the former president and his wife Melania paid no federal taxes in 2020. And the IRS has largely not followed its own policy of conducting yearly audits of the president's returns. Vaughn Hilliard is in West Palm Beach for us tonight.
Yeah, Lindsay, we are awaiting here in the days ahead for those actual tax returns to become public here, to be released by the Ways and Means Committee. The committee is presently, we are told, working through to redact some information, sensitive information, personal information from them. But when we're talking about Donald Trump and the tax returns, you're looking at a candidate back in 2015 and 2016 who consistently used being under audit by the IRS as an excuse for not turning over and making public his finances and his tax returns, which is customary among presidential candidates. And then after he was elected in 2016, he said, look, the public didn't care. They voted me into office. And over the course of his presidency, he continued to claim that the IRS was auditing him. But what the initial report here from the House Ways and Means Committee reveals is that Donald Trump's tax returns from 2015 and 2016 were not actually being audited all the way until 2019. And that was not until the Means Committee came to the IRS seeking the tax returns and his financial records. And over the course of the 2017 to 2020 tax returns, those were not audited until after Donald Trump had left the White House. None of those 6 years of returns, we should note, have actually been completed in the audit. So there is still so much that we do not know here at this time. The question is what will these tax returns obviously reveal? I mean, it was back in 2016, Donald Trump's Republican rivals were suggesting there could be bombshells as to why Donald Trump did not want to make them public. And of course, it was just here in the last month that the Trump Organization, his family business, was found to be criminally liable and having engaged in a tax fraud scheme over the course of 15 years. And so that is why there is so much interest in what potentially these additional tax returns could reveal.
Vaughn Hilliard, thank you. Coming up, Idaho police are making a reversal in their investigation into the murders of 4 college students. Why they say what was once a crucial piece of evidence is no longer related to the case. Plus, a shakeup at Twitter, what Elon Musk is revealing about his future at the company. The search is on for the next CEO of Twitter tonight after the company's current head, Elon Musk, tweeted that he's going to resign. Quote, as soon as he finds someone foolish enough to take the job. He adds he'll continue to run the software and servers teams. It comes just days after 57% of people who voted in his Twitter poll said he should step down as CEO. Joining me right now, Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver. Caleb, good to see you here. Musk has said he expected to reduce his time at Twitter, find someone else to run it over time. How big of a surprise is this to you?
Not really that big of a surprise, and he's got to have a plan eventually because Twitter right now, there's a lot to be figured out in terms of what's going to happen with the company. He's cut more than half of the staff, right? He's started to charge now for the verification check marks for businesses and individuals. So he's got what he thinks is the company on a path to make a profit or at least break even by the end of the year. That's what he said today in a Twitter chat. But he is trying to recruit somebody. That's not exactly the type of recruiting post you want to put out there, whoever's crazy enough to run it. But working for Elon Musk is going to be interesting no matter who takes the job.
Caleb, was this an off-ramp for Musk? Was this poll kind of just a ruse?
Yeah, probably. But remember, he owns the company. It's a private company, so he can do whatever he wants with it. Unlike Tesla, which is a publicly traded company, he's got to respond to shareholders. He's got to respond to the board of directors sometimes when he wants to. But this is a company that he bought. It was buying with a lot of his own money, so he can do whatever he wants. Is it a ruse? Probably. But you got to give him credit for using the platform, which he now owns, to ask whether or not he should still run the platform. And then heeding the vote from voters who overwhelmingly said, you know, he should probably find another CEO. Not overwhelmingly, but still the majority.
Well, you kind of mentioned why it's a rocky time for the company. In addition to slashing more than half their staff, they've reinstated far-right accounts. They've made really big changes in the verification process. So how do they go about finding a new CEO? I mean, Musk himself tweeted after he posted the poll that no one wants the job who can actually keep Twitter alive. There is no successor.
Yeah. I mean, that's way to go out there and try to recruit the best in the business. But this is the way Musk is, and this is the way he works. But what is the path to profitability? Remember, at the end of the day, Twitter is an advertising delivery mechanism. It's an advertising delivery platform. It was not keeping up in terms of revenue growth per user, like the Snapchats of the world, like the Instagrams of the world. That was the problem in the past several years with Twitter. Does he have a plan to make it profitable, or is this just another one of the companies like the Boring Company, like Neuralink, like SpaceX, that he just likes to own for the sake of owning it? We'll see. It's going to be tough to find somebody to be the CEO of this company and make it grow. But at the end of the day, this is a privately held company, and Musk doesn't have to answer to shareholders about it.
So even with a new CEO, how much is really going to change since Musk still owns it?
Not a lot. And you better believe that CEO is going to fall in line with what the owner of the company wants. The owner of the company, of course, is Elon Musk. So, again, they don't have to respond to the board or to shareholders. They're going to have to do what he wants to do and pursue the path that he wants to set forward for the future of Twitter. Twitter is obviously a very influential platform. We all use it. The question is, can it be a good business going forward down the road? And does it even matter, given the fact that it's Elon Musk's private company?
All right, Caleb Silver, thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, home sales declined by more than 7% in November compared to October. Sales were down 35.4% year over year, making it the 10th straight month of declines. The median sales price rose 3.5% to a little over $370,000 from a year ago. Number 2, legendary Steelers running back Franco Harris has died at the age of 72. He was considered one of the NFL's most iconic athletes, was known for one of the most famous plays in American football history. His death comes just 2 days before the 50th anniversary of that play, called the Immaculate Reception. The cause of Harris's death is still unknown. Number 3, in Britain, the government is asking people not to take unnecessary car trips, avoid getting drunk, and stop contact sports. Why? Because thousands of ambulance workers began a one-day strike on Wednesday. They promised to respond to life-threatening calls, but officials say they can't guarantee everyone who needs an ambulance will get one. The union is looking for big raises. Number 4, Idaho investigators have been searching for a white Hyundai that they said was close to the scene of the murders of 4 college students last month. Well, yesterday, police took a closer look at a car that crashed in Oregon about 500 miles away from the scene that matched the description. They determined the abandoned car in Oregon was not connected to the crime. Number 5, mask requirements are back in one of New Jersey's largest public school districts because of rising COVID-19 cases. The superintendent of Passaic Public Schools told parents yesterday that a school board policy requires masks when the state health department documents a high level of COVID cases. The district has 17 schools and about 14,000 students. All right, when we come back, stories of resilience in Ukraine. We'll hear directly from those who have survived the worst of Russia's war. Stay with us. Iconic locations around the world are going dark tonight. That story coming up in the local. But first, the Ukrainian city of Izium was occupied by Russian forces for 5 months this year, until September, when a counteroffensive liberated the city. It's estimated that 1,000 people lost their lives there during the Russian occupation. More than 80% of the town infrastructure was destroyed. An NBC News team spent weeks inside Izium hearing those stories of the people who survived the worst of Russia's war. Despite relentless bombardment, airstrikes, and allegations of torture by occupying Russian forces, the people are not defeated. Tonight at 10:30 p.m., a special titled Life, Death, and Liberation, Izium, Ukraine, hosted by Aaron McLaughlin, airs on NBC News Now. And Aaron joins me right now. So, Aaron, we've got these allegations of torture by Russian troops in Izium that are being investigated. What did you learn during your reporting?
Well, Lindsay, we were given a tour by one of Ukraine's main war crimes investigators of the police station in Izium that investigators allege was transformed by occupying Russian forces into a prison and torture center. They allege that the occupying forces were torturing ordinary Ukrainian civilians in the upper levels of the police station, and then on the lower levels in the basement, that's where they would keep keep prisoners in tiny, cramped cells with no light, no heat. 4 prisoners were kept in a single cell that I saw. There were mattresses in the cell, as well as evidence that that's where the prisoners were eating. Also, that's evidence of that's where the prisoners were going to the bathroom. It was truly horrifying to see the desperation of these prisoners literally etched on the walls of this cell. Take a listen.
People who were there mark on the wall lines. You see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 days somebody was there. And in this wall, on this wall, you can see date 29 June 22. Somebody who named Lyoha, it's like Alexei, and this person wrote cross and the words, God save us.
Serhiy Bulvanov, the chief investigator there, alleges that this kind of torture center is not unique to Izum. They found torture centers, he alleges, in pretty much every village, every town that Russian forces occupied in the Kharkiv region. Now, we reached out to the Russian Ministry of Defense for comment on those allegations and have yet to hear back. Lindsay.
And Aaron, I mean, we just saw President Zelensky at the White House with President Biden. They talked about these atrocities. They talked about the resilience also. I mean, how did these people survive?
You know, it was truly stunning to be in Izum week after week and talking to the residents. They really did endure the worst of this war, primarily because of where Izum is located. It's a strategic city of 40,000. Whoever controls Izum is thought to be in good position to control Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine. So this was intensely bombarded as Ukrainian forces and Russian forces fought for control of the city, then occupied for over 5 months by the Russian forces until ultimately Ukrainian forces were successful in pushing them out. It was difficult to see a building that was untouched by war. These people were absolutely traumatized, and they managed, many of them telling us, to pull together, and that's how many of them say they were able to survive. We interviewed one couple. They've been married 47 years, Antonina and Yevhen. They somehow sheltered from the bombardment in a basement that was over 100 years old. They told us it was their love. It was a love story. It was their compassion and understanding for each other. That's why they were able to pull through. I was speaking to another resident who told me that he survived just out of luck. It was sheer numbers at that point. Lindsay.
Aaron McLaughlin, thank you so much. And we will all be watching Aaron's special report, Life, Death, and Liberation, Izum, Ukraine, tonight on NBC News Now at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Across social media, some kids are big-name stars are, to use a Gen Z phrase, fighting for their lives right now. Why? Because of this massive spread by New York Magazine's Vulture on so-called Nepo babies. But first, let's back up, because you're probably asking, Lindsay, what the heck's a Nepo baby? It's basically anyone who's got a famous parent in showbiz. And even though nepotism in Hollywood has seemingly always existed, there's renewed discussion about it online, with content creators calling out a long list of successful celebrity children. You're going to see a couple here with their parents, Maude Apatow, Maya Hawke, John David Washington. Not a lot of these so-called Nepo babies have spoken out since the article was published. But one of the few who has, is O'Shea Jackson Jr., the son of Ice Cube, who says he recognizes his privilege, but it took hard work to get where he is once that door was open. Callan Rosenblatt joins me now. Callan, the piece, it acknowledges that, look, the stars of earlier generations exist. Laura Dern, Michael Douglas, Tracy Ellis Ross. Again, this is nothing new, but why does it seem to touch such a nerve with Gen Z?
Well, Lindsay, I think Gen Z is uniquely positioned at the intersection of both being, a pop culture fanatic, any Gen Z person is at the pulse of pop culture. They could probably tell you anything about any celebrity these days. And they're also at the intersection of being incredibly social conscious. So they're very aware of issues of things like privilege and power and how that affects certain people and how they got to the positions that they're in. Now, no one is saying, that these nepotism babies didn't work hard, but Gen Z is just acknowledging that there was a privilege involved in how they got to the position that they're in now. So they're just having this really unique perspective of knowing, sort of what is going on in pop culture, as well as sort of having this socially conscious background. And I think that's why they are so clued in about nepotism babies, especially in Hollywood, but also acknowledging that they exist in every field.
But that's what's so interesting. I mean, a lot of these so-called Nepo babies aren't embracing their status. They're arguing it doesn't even exist, that they got where they were because of hard work first. But what does it say right now about our online culture that they feel the need to defend themselves?
Well, Lindsay, I think first, just as someone who studies internet culture, it's never really good when you're on the defensive. I think it says a lot about how a conversation can be viewed as a critique. Really, I don't think anyone is, any of these celebrities, and we have some of their responses here. I don't think anyone is saying that, they didn't work hard or that, that there's something wrong with what they did. And I think a lot of the perspective here is that this commentary, that's just understanding this point of privilege, is somehow an attack or a critique. And I think a lot of the time when you're on the receiving end of those sort of commentaries on social media, it can feel like an attack, and it can feel like you need to be on the defensive of that attack. But really, I think it's never a good idea, first of all, to push back from a place of privilege. And also, I think it just shows that we kind of have this divisive conversation on social media, and that maybe, we need to sort of look at things through a different lens of that a commentary is not necessarily a criticism.
Let's look at broadly here. Hollywood thrives on this sort of stuff. And even some of the most so-called notorious Nepo babies in this piece, like Brooklyn Beckham, have massive followings. Do you see younger stars who maybe don't have connections getting any more or less famous than the ones that do?
Well, I don't have like a crystal ball to make like a serious prediction, but I will say that, as you mentioned, Lindsay, this conversation is not new. It has been going on social media for a long time, and it's just sort of hitting the mainstream now. So the fact that Gen Z and younger people and even some millennials have had this conversation for a long time, I think we would have seen the effect already, and we haven't seen it. So I think everyone is kind of going to stay in their place for now.
Okay, Callan Rosenblatt, thanks so much. Good to see you as always. That's a wrap for this hour. Much more here tomorrow, same time, same place. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.